Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2012 Candidates and Issues Forum. This forum is sponsored by the Edmonds Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Committee of the Commerce Chamber. My name is Chris Cuse. I'm the moderator tonight. And tonight's forum is going to be in two parts. The first part will feature a discussion on the three initiatives and the one referendum that will be on the state ballot at this time. And then the second part will feature the candidates running for State House of Representatives and the two candidates for the U.S. Congressional District number 7. Each part should last just about an hour. Our goal is to be out of here somewhere around 9 o'clock this evening. In between the two sessions, we've invited Mr. Michael Baumgartner, who is a candidate for the U.S. Senate, to give a 3-minute statement. His opponent, Senator Maria Cantwell, was invited, but was not able to attend. The format tonight will be an opening statement of 2 minutes by each of the speakers and the candidates when they come up. And then there will be questions and answers. There will be 1-minute responses. And then there will be a closing statement, 1 minute for the closing statement. The forum will be televised on Channel 21 and Channel 39, and will also be video streamed on myedmonds.com. And this will occur on Thursday of this week. So you tell your friends and family members and anyone that's interested to watch. Washington State is a mail-in ballot state. All ballots will be mailed out on October 19th to the residences in the state. Deadline for mailing your ballots for the election is Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th. Timekeeper tonight. Each speaker will be timed because of the shortness of time. It's important we keep to the schedule. Jan Kavadas is up front here with the time cards. And Jan, if you would show the speakers in the audience the times. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds, and a 15-second. And then when time runs out, what do, Jan?
I stand up.
You stand up. And you don't want Jan to stand up. I would like to start the program tonight with a quote from Voltaire. I do not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Okay? We recognize that some of the issues and programs that are going to be discussed tonight you may not agree with, and that's okay. We're here to discuss them openly and honestly with an audience and for the TV audience also. So we ask that you please give them your respect. Not a lot of hollering and hoopla and yeah or boo-boo. None of that, please, because, again, we're on a tight time schedule and we want to give the candidates and the speakers their full allotted time. So we appreciate that. You will have an opportunity to recognize the candidates at an appropriate time. And Michael Baumgartner is here. Is that correct? Michael, would you come up to the podium over here?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Michael is only here for a short period of time, I understand, and has to leave fairly soon. So we're going to give Michael his 3 minutes right now to... Okay, we're going to start on the initiatives. First, tonight, we're going to start with I-502, and that's the legalized sale of marijuana. Representing the pro side of the issue is Mr. Rick Steves. Mr. Steves is a business owner, Europe through the back door, and that business is located here in Edmonds. Welcome, Rick. Opposing the issue is Mr. Pat Slack. Mr. Slack is with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. He asked me that I make sure that you understand he is here as an individual, not as a representative of the Sheriff's Office. And he is not on the clock for the Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Mr. Slack, for being here tonight. Representing 1185, and they are not here, right? Reuben? Yes. Reuben is here. Okay, Representative Reuben Carlisle is here, an elected official from the 36th District with Washington State House of Representatives on the issue of two-thirds approval to raise taxes. Thank you for being here, Representative. But Amber is not here yet. Ms. Carter is not here yet? Okay. Next, we have I-1240, which is the Charter Schools Initiative. Mr. Tim Cease is here, spokesperson yes on 1240 Coalition, and Melissa Westbrook, spokesperson no on 1240. Welcome and thank you for coming this evening. On Referendum 74, the same-sex marriage referendum, yes on 74, State Representative Marco Leas is here, representing Washington United for Marriage, and representing the con position, Mr. Chip White is not here yet. Is that correct? He has not come in. Okay. Hopefully he will arrive shortly. So we're going to start on I-502, the legalization of the sale of marijuana. This is a measure that would license and regulate marijuana production, distribution, and possession for persons over 21, remove state law criminal and civil penalties for activities that it authorizes, tax marijuana sales, and earmark marijuana-related revenues. We're going to start with an opening statement by Mr. Steves. And Mr. Steves, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Initiative 502 is designed to legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana for adults. And the laws pertaining to people under 21 do not change. And it would be with the liquor store model, with standalone government licensed stores that would just sell marijuana, with thoughtful and careful provisions to make sure that it's 1,000 feet away from schools and playgrounds, and that there'd be no advertising and so on. It comes with very strict DUI provisions, because we believe anybody caught in driving intoxicated by anything should really have the book thrown at them, and we think that's an important part of this provision. Also, it's got a system of taxation where, according to a nonpartisan government agency, it would raise $500 million in taxes for our state each year. And that money is being raised right now, but it's going to gangs and organized crime and enriching people who shouldn't be enriched by the sale of marijuana. Half of that $500 million would be dedicated to the general fund, and about half of it would go to health care and drug abuse and prevention programs. Our feeling is that if we take the crime out of the equation and treat drug abuse as an education and a health challenge, we can lessen harm in our society. We've been fighting this war against marijuana for a long time, and I think by any estimate we have not done very well in effectively curbing drug abuse. My sponsors and I are certainly not stoners. We acknowledge that marijuana is a drug. It's not healthy. It can be addictive. We're not pro-marijuana. We're anti-prohibition. Just like when they stopped prohibition against alcohol back in the 30s, they weren't saying booze is good. They were saying the law against it is causing more harm to the society than the drug itself. We're endorsed. It's a complicated issue. I've been at this for 10 years. It is a case where it does help to look at who endorses it. We're endorsed by the NAACP in our state to look out for the needs of black communities. We're endorsed by the Children's Alliance, 100 different community organizations looking out for the interest of children and families. We're endorsed by our city attorney, former federal prosecuting attorney. Just today, the current King County Sheriff came out in favor of us. We're endorsed by the mayors of Seattle, Tacoma, Kirkland, and Bellingham. We're excited to take the crime out of marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Slack, do you have a rebuttal to that opening statement?
Well, I think the initiative is poor policy, public policy, and I think the cart is way ahead of the horse. In the November election, if this passes, it becomes law in December of 2012, and then is handed over to the Liquor Control Board to develop the rules and regulations. They're not required to have those rules and regulations in place until December of 2013. So what it means is individuals 21 years of age and older can possess an ounce of marijuana, but where are they going to get it? You're still going to have to get it from the black markets where you're going to have to buy it in that year. During that year, or until a liquor board gets the rules and regulations in place, there will be no taxes that will come into the state of Washington. So for us in law enforcement, it doesn't change our activity. Another thing that's of importance here, in the pro camp, they talk about 10,000 people a year are arrested for possession of marijuana in the state of Washington. 42% of those are under the age of 21 and still will be arrested. And they're the ones that are most tragically impacted by a possession arrest. Those numbers, I believe, will go up, not down. And that'll be problematic for those young people to get jobs, to get college education, to get the other incentives that were with it. The gangs will still be out there. One of the challenges is depending on how the liquor board makes its rules and regulations. You have to realize you're not legalizing marijuana, you're legalizing Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. That's the active ingredient. If the Liquor Control Board says that the maximum percentage will be 10% or 15%, the gang members are going to be out there. It's not going to stop the gang activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steves, do you have a rebuttal to that? You have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Yeah. Commander Slack talks about the problems of it being delayed and how people will still have problems with gangs getting money and so on. But that's the same problem we have now. And I think it's time, as our organization has called for, a new approach. A lot of the arguments against I-502 or having a more pragmatic approach to marijuana are based on the assumption that use will go up. I firmly believe that use will not go up. And that is based on other societies' experience. The Dutch have not arrested a pot smoker for 25 years, and by every estimate, our governments and theirs, the Dutch smoke half the marijuana per capita that Americans do. The Portuguese have just decriminalized the consumption of all drugs 10 years ago, and those who were for and against it have assessed it after 10 years, and they found that the only thing gateway about marijuana is the fact that it's illegal. If you care about kids, you want to regulate it. You don't want to have it sold by people in the streets. When it's sold in a liquor store, the Dutch have found that young people are staying away from it. When it's sold on the streets, you've got people with a vested interest in getting kids hooked on something more addictive and more profitable. This is a complicated issue, but it's time to think a little bit out of the box, learn from other societies, and bottom line, I believe there will be a spike up in use when it's all exciting because it's suddenly legal, but then it'll settle back down, and if the Dutch experience is anything to learn from, the average Dutch person has never even smelled marijuana. It's not sexy, it's not an interesting issue, it's just they don't have anybody in their prisons because of drugs. The Dutch are renting out prison space to the Belgians right now because they don't know what to do with their prisons.
Thank you, Mr. Steves. I would remind the speakers to speak into the microphone, or else it does not pick up on the video, so appreciate that. Mr. Slack, do you have a rebuttal for that? You have 1 minute if you do.
In reference to the Netherlands and their current operation, as I read the reviews back there, they're restructuring their coffee houses, they're reducing the amount of areas because of the problems. As Mr. Steves has pointed out, in a previous conversation with me, this is from the tourists, and that's one of the things that is potentially will happen if the state of Washington legalizes it. You're going to have people coming in from the outside. The gangs are still in the Netherlands. There's still illegal grow-ops going in the Netherlands. They're still dealing with a lot of these problems in there. So if you change the law, I enforce the laws that you change, whatever that is. But at least make it a good law, something that is there and it's effective and will serve you well and will serve law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steves, I have a question for you. Federal law currently prohibits citizens from manufacturing, distributing, purchasing, and using marijuana. My understanding, state law cannot supersede federal law. Is this not a futile initiative if passed in regards to law enforcement?
Our government is designed where states can be the incubator of change. And if it wasn't for states standing up against federal laws against alcohol, you could still be arrested for drinking a beer. In the 90s, there was a real move for medical marijuana. The governments wouldn't do it, so they did it by initiative. Now 17 states have legalized marijuana for medical purposes, and so far the federal government, it's done flat out illegally as far as the federal government is concerned, and states that are in compliance with unambiguous and smart laws are generally not bothered by the feds. We have to do something about our war on drugs, and up until now I understand 99% of all of the drug enforcement has been state-wise. I think it's a little bit of a question, how will the federal authorities react to this, but I do think that when we have a smart law and we see that it takes the crime out of the equation, and when we see that we can educate people so they will smoke, use drugs less, as we've done effectively with tobacco recently, I think the federal government will see that this is a wave that's happening, and they need to not fight it. But it is an interesting issue. I believe that prohibition ends one state at a time. I'm excited that Washington State could be the first state to help us end this expensive and tragic war on drugs in our society.
Thank you. Mr. Slack, question. Some argue that alcohol and smoking cigarettes are more harmful to an individual than smoking marijuana. What say you to this contention?
In the paperwork that I have read, there's experts on both sides of this issue saying that it is and it's not. It's not my field. It's not my deal of expertise. So I really don't have an opinion on it, other than the fact that currently in the marijuana laws that we have, we're struggling to try and find the enforcement from the initiative that the people passed and that the legislature have dealt with in reference to the medical marijuana. It's confusing. So whatever the people pass needs to be clear and concise so law enforcement can serve you correctly. These things happen in your community. It's about a quality of life issue to you. When you call 911, you want to get someone that will come and take care of your problem. That's all we're looking for. Thank you.
Okay. And unfortunately, we need to wrap this segment up, so we will give each of you 1 minute for your closing comment. And we'll start with Mr. Steves.
By the way, is it okay to have, I've got some brochures, can I leave them out afterwards or something like that for the...
I have been told that because this is a public facility, we cannot have brochures out.
This is such an exciting issue to deal with, and I'm so glad that we've had a chance to talk about it. If you'd like to learn more about it, for 10 years I've been busy on this. It's a very complicated issue. I'm giving a 1-hour talk at the Edmonds Theatre next Saturday at 11:30. And I'm giving talks in 15 cities around the state. You can easily Google Rick Steves and marijuana and find out where I'm going to be. Commander Slack was talking about we need concise laws. In the 1930s, Mayor LaGuardia in New York said, when society has a law in the book that it doesn't intend to enforce consistently across the board, the very existence of that law erodes respect for law enforcement in general. I was having lunch with Mike Meehan, who's the police chief in Berkeley right now, but he used to be Gil Kerlikowski's key guy here in the drug abuse problems in Seattle. And he asked me, because he had been instructed to follow me and listen to what I was saying, he asked me, Rick, why are you into this? You can smoke pot all you want. You're not endangered. Rich white guys don't get arrested. Poor people and black people get arrested. This is a very serious problem in our society, and I just think there's good reason why the Children's Alliance and the NAACP and lots of law enforcement people are realizing we need to take the crime out of the equation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Slack, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
I-502 will not take crime out of the equation. The individuals that we're currently chasing around that are the high-level drug dealers are not going to wake up the day after the election and say, I got to go get a real job because they passed this. They're still going to be out there doing this stuff. And if government's involved, there's taxes, the costs are there, the black market's going to be there, and they're going to be selling it. So the gangs are going to be there whatever you do. We try to hold them down as best we can. In reference to minorities being arrested, we've looked at this. There's a lot of research on why this happens. It's not law enforcement targeting minorities at all. It is just the activity that is going on in a particular area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank both of you very much. Why don't you give them applause right now? The next issue we'll discuss tonight is Initiative 1185, and this is the 2/3 majority required to raise taxes. Is Ms. Carter, has she arrived yet? Not here yet. Okay. Well, Representative Carlisle, it looks like it's all you tonight. Why don't we start out? Why don't you make an opening statement, and you have 2 minutes for your opening statement, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. My name is Reuven Carlisle. I live in Seattle with my wife, who's an anesthesiologist, and our 4 children. I work as a technology entrepreneur, and I also have the great honor of serving as a part-time citizen legislator. And I see 3 of my colleagues, Representative Leas, Representative Kagi, Representative Ryu, and just really honored to be here with you tonight. 1185 is an initiative to require a 2/3 majority of the legislature to adjust any type of taxes or close any type of tax loophole. For me, the reason I'm here as a volunteer and the reason I feel so strongly that this is bad public policy is, first of all, that the state of Colorado tried almost this identical policy. It was a complete disaster. Their very conservative Republican governor asked the voters of their state 10 years later to suspend that policy, and those Republican voters did. This policy initiative is unconstitutional, as we are seeing it's before the state Supreme Court right now. It's also eviscerating our ability to fully fund public education. The 18 states in our country that have supermajority requirements, every single one of them that has that rule receives a national grade of C or less in the quality of their public education system. There's a whole range of issues I look forward to talking with you about tonight. I just really appreciate the community's willingness to elevate the civic dialogue about this very tough issue. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight and hope to answer a couple of questions since we can have a full debate.
I have a couple of questions for you. This issue has been on the ballot now, I believe, on at least 2 different occasions in the past. Each time, it's been approved by a majority of the people of the state of Washington. It appears that the citizens of this state are interested in this type of initiative. Why not go with the will of the people and implement this type of requirement in raising taxes?
That's a great question. I really appreciate it raising it. The people in our state rule, and the people govern. And we have a fiduciary responsibility to not only listen to the people, but to balance out direct democracy, which works through initiative, and representative democracy, which works through elections. The people have spoken on this issue, and it is important to appreciate and to respect that. But the founders of our state also felt very strongly about the constitutional infrastructure of how to change the Constitution. What this initiative does is it uses simple majority of the people to eliminate simple majority. And the constitutional issue is very serious. Our state's founders and our national founders were vigorously and aggressively and fiercely opposed to supermajority. In respecting the will of the people, my hope is that we can ask the proponents to propose a constitutional amendment the way every other state in the nation that has embraced supermajority has done, except Washington State.
Okay. Initiative 1185 does set up the mechanism for voter approval on increasing taxes by simple majority vote. Why not let the people decide if taxes should be raised?
Well, the very legitimate right of the people to have direct democracy is a very important right. But there is also representative democracy relative to the legislature's ability to fully fund education, to prevent a doubling of tuition at the University of Washington, at Edmonds Community College, and everywhere else in this state. So the balance between direct democracy of initiative and representative democracy is important. Forbes magazine lists us one of the top states in the nation for the quality of our business climate. The Tax Foundation, a very conservative think tank in Washington, D.C., but very respected for their research, lists us as number 7 in the nation in the quality of our tax system. We're 29th in the nation in the obligation or the burden of state and local taxes, and yet we have a quality of life that's off the charts compared to those other states. So the question of direct and representative democracy is important, and there is a role for the legislature to try to fund public education in this state.
Okay, thank you. We're not going to ask you if you have anything else you would like to say. You do get a 1-minute closing statement. If you would like to make a closing statement, you may do so now.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I would note that this entire initiative is funded by overwhelmingly over 90% by 3 interests. That is British Petroleum, ConocoPhillips, and the alcohol industry in Washington, D.C. The reason is direct retaliation for the legislature's attempt to pass modest fees that would mitigate the negative effects of oil and runoff into Puget Sound and into children's health care for some of the alcohol abuse that we have in this state. It's in direct retaliation. It's funded exclusively almost by those entities. This proposal sounds good on the surface. Others state it, and it failed. Our education system, we're 46th in the nation. We have a high quality of life in our state, but we're under severe, severe pressure. Because of not only our inability to have a basic balance around our state budget, but also to acknowledge the fact that it takes a simple majority to create a tax exemption or a loophole, but a supermajority to eliminate that same exemption. It is undemocratic. We can do better as a state, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carlisle. Would you give Representative Carlisle a hand, please, for being here tonight? The next initiative that we're going to address is Initiative 1240, the Charter Schools Initiative. This measure would authorize up to 40 publicly funded charter schools open to all students, operated through approved, non-religious, non-profit organizations with government oversight, and modify certain laws applicable to them as public schools. And we're going to start with your opening statement with Mr. Cease tonight. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And thank all of you for coming tonight to hear about the issues and candidates that are going to be on the November ballot. As you heard, Initiative 1240 would authorize the creation of up to 40 public charter schools over the next 5 years in the state of Washington. Let's start by talking about what a public charter school is. First of all, that's exactly what it is. It's public, just like a traditional public school. It's free and it's open to any student who wishes to attend. Teachers have to meet the same requirements to teach as they do at any public school. Students are held to the same academic standards and have to take the same tests and scoring that other students do in the traditional public schools. And they are funded in exactly the same way as traditional public schools are in the state of Washington. What they do allow is principals and teachers to have more flexibility in how they teach, the curriculum they use, the approach they take, extend hours for students if they're needed. That kind of flexibility to achieve results for kids that traditional public schools aren't necessarily serving. There's a couple of numbers I want you to think about tonight as we're having this conversation. The first is 14,000. That's the number of kids that dropped out of school in the state of Washington last year. A little over 1,500 of them were from Snohomish County. They're not being served by traditional public schools. The second number is 41. That's the number of states in this country that already have public charter schools. And the ones that have gotten it right are getting significantly good results. Newsweek just published their list of transformational high schools in the country. Those are schools that serve at high-risk kids, low-income kids, hard-to-serve kids. Of those transformational schools they named, 60% of them were public charter schools that were getting the best results that we've seen. That's what we want for the state of Washington. That's what we want, the choice and the option for our parents and our students here. So if you agree, I urge you to support Initiative 1240.
Thank you. Ms. Westbrook, we're going to have you give your opening statement at this time, and you have 2 minutes for that opening statement.
Oh, I'm not doing a rebuttal to his
Not
statement.
yet.
Oh, okay then. Good evening. Let's start with the facts. Number one, Washington State is the only state in our country that has ever voted on charter schools, and we have said no 3 times. 2, over the last 20 years in 41 states, the promise of charter schools has gone largely unfulfilled. For accountability, the feds report more than half of their charter authorizers say they have problems closing down low-performing charter schools. In accountability, the best-known, best peer-reviewed study shows that only 17% of charters do better than traditional schools. The Washington State Supreme Court has said our existing schools are underfunded. How will thinning that pot of money and bringing on more underfunded schools solve our problems? Fourth, directly to 1240, this initiative is poorly written and vague and offers no real hope to at-risk students or real parent engagement. That lack of parent engagement is one of the reasons that the Washington State PTA has said no to this initiative, along with the NAACP, the Washington State Democrats, El Centro de la Raza, and the League of Women Voters. It doesn't require charters to provide transportation. When you're saying to at-risk, to parents with children who are poor, if you take away the transportation, they don't really get a choice. Charters consistently underserve special ed, ELL, and homeless students. And in fact, the 5 districts in this country with charters are being investigated by the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Education because of violations for those children. The new charter commission that would be appointed would be politically appointed. Once appointed, would have absolutely no oversight by anyone elected or otherwise. Washington State is not standing still. We have the highest SAT scores in the country for the 9th year. We are moving ahead. We are going to do better. And what we really need to do is fully fund our existing schools and fund those schools that need the help with the techniques that we know that work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Westbrook, if you wish to make a rebuttal on Mr. Cease's opening statement, you have 1 minute to do so.
Charter schools are publicly funded, but they are quasi-private because they are run by private entities, the nonprofits. And in fact, those nonprofits can contract out almost any service except operations. They can contract out management, educational services, any and all services to for-profit companies. We do have flexibility within our own system. Let me give you a good example. Down in Tacoma, Tacoma High School, they have a high school within their high school, Tacoma Central, and that school is primarily only for at-risk students, and they have closed the achievement gap. The flexibility is there. Schools have to take advantage of it. We need to do what is working within our own school system. And as to the topic of 41 states, all I can tell you is if charters were working this well, we would all know about it. But only 17% of them work, and there's nothing in this initiative that guarantees that we will get the best charters or that they will serve the at-risk kids we are seeking to serve. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Cease, any rebuttal on Ms. Westbrook's opening statement?
Yes, thank you. That study she likes to cite is done by Stanford, and when you stop reading, when you get the answer you want, you miss a lot. When you read further into that study, you find that Stanford actually finds that states with the best laws are getting outstanding results. Extraordinary results, particularly with high-risk kids, the kids that usually drop out, don't graduate, don't go on to college. In some cases, they're getting near 100% graduation rates and 100% college acceptance for these kids in Aspire School in California and schools in Boston. These are the states this law is modeled after. In fact, this law was recently reviewed by a charter organization nationally. It was given an A for being one of the strongest laws, if it's implemented, in the country governing charter schools, public charter schools. And one of the reasons is for accountability. There is strict accountability measures in this. It requires it to be evaluated annually and then evaluated at the end of the 5-year program. There are outstanding charter schools getting outstanding results. It should be an option for our students in the state as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cease. Ms. Westbrook, a rebuttal? I can go to a question.
No. There is no district in the entire country that, because of the presence of charter schools, has closed the achievement gap. And you would think in 41 states in 20 years, you would have one district to be able to say that. That is not saying a lot for charters. Are there good charters? There absolutely are. There's absolutely good traditional public schools as well. The problem is, as we all know, the devil is in the details. There's nothing in this initiative that guarantees at-risk students will be served. We have no way of knowing what charters we're going to get. And in fact, if we get more proposals than there are room for charters, there's 8 a year. Do you know what happens? We don't go to a second round and look for the very best schools that he was just referencing, the best charter groups. It goes into a lottery. Is that the best way to pick good public schools for our children? I think it isn't. I urge you to consider a no vote on 1240.
Mr. Cease, do you have a rebuttal to this?
I think we have to read the initiative and make sure we're accurate about it. First of all, the highest priority for public charter schools is for those schools that will serve at-risk kids. It's clearly laid out in the initiative, and there's no ambiguity about it. Secondly, I heard earlier that transportation wasn't addressed. It is addressed in the initiative. It is a component of the application a public charter school needs to make to show that they will be providing transportation services as part of their mission. In fact, the application process for a public charter school covers all areas from budget to academics to the facilities to transportation. So it is an exhaustive approach to this. I would say, too, that when Melissa talks about school districts not achieving, closing the achievement gap, that's absolutely true for the school districts in this state as well. We need another option, an option that can serve kids that aren't being served by the status quo. I said 14,000 kids a year are dropping out. Are we going to tell them, wait some more until we get the funding, until we get it right?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cease. I have a question for you, Mr. Cease. There was a recent Supreme Court decision that the legislature needs to put billions of dollars more into public schools. Will not charter schools siphon off some of those badly needed dollars for the public school system?
Very good question. I'm glad you asked that. One thing we can agree on is the legislature does need to deal with adequate funding for public schools. But charter schools, public charter schools, are funded in the exact same way as existing traditional schools. In the state of Washington, public funds for education follow the student, no matter which choice that student makes to attend which school, whether it's an existing traditional school, an existing alternative school, if that student should choose to go to another district. Or if that student chooses a public charter school, the money follows the student to the facility, and that then is paying for that student's education in that school district. Office of Financial Management did a fiscal note on this initiative, and they concluded that same thing and said the entire cost of this initiative would be $600,000 a year over the 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Westbrook, I have a follow-up question for you. Is there a concern that charter schools will take the very best and brightest students away from the public school system and thus lose the spectrum of academic mix that is present now?
I don't know that I would say they will take the best and the brightest. They tend to take the most motivated parents and students. Charters tend to be very segregated. They're either highly minority or highly white. That tends to not have the best outcomes. I don't worry so much about the best and the brightest. I worry about charters taking money away from existing schools. Folks, money does follow students, but it follows them from school to school. These are creating new schools. It is more money that goes out the door. The money that goes with the student, every dollar doesn't go in the classroom. Of course, it goes to support your librarian, your nurse. When you take children out of a school, you will have fewer funds in the schools. As well, the Charter Commission will cost $600,000 a year, but what the state said is there's an indeterminate cost to all of this, that they can't make a determination. $3 million a year is not going to cover all of what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to go to your closing statements. Each of you have 1 minute for a closing statement. Mr. Cease, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate you being here tonight. First of all, I want to remind you of a few things about Initiative 1241. They are public charter schools. They are indeed public. 2, they are highly accountable. They are accountable through local school districts and through the State Charter Commission and through the Governor's Office, which the State Charter Commission is accountable to itself. Finally, Initiative 1240 provides an option for flexibility to serve students that are not being currently served by the status quo in our traditional schools today. 14,000 kids a year are dropping out every year from our school system. 1,500 of those, as I said, were from Snohomish County. If you think the status quo is working, it's not working for them. There are innovation schools in this state, but public charter schools are another option that can help with some of the issues that we're having with our current education system. I urge your support for Initiative 1240 to create these schools over the next 5 years, to give these kids and our parents a different option and a chance at success. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Westbrook, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Washington State is not standing still. As Representative Carlisle knows, the legislature has passed not 1 but 2 innovation school laws in the last year. They passed a STEM law, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, to encourage more of those within our public school system. As I said, we already have a high school in Tacoma that's closing the achievement gap for at-risk kids, and there are other schools that are going to emulate that. For the 9th straight year, Washington State is at the top for SAT scores. At Rainier Beach High School, a low-income high school in Seattle, their PTA is so determined and has done so well for that school that their PTA president went to the White House to receive only 112 Champions of Change awards by President Obama. The real discussion belongs in fully funding our schools with what we know works and what it works for those at-risk students, and not in bringing on more underfunded schools in an unproven system like charters. I urge your consideration for a no vote on 1240.
Thank you. Let's give them both applause, please. The next issue that we will be discussing is Referendum Measure 74. The legislature passed and gross substitute Senate Bill 6239 concerning marriage for same-sex couples, modified domestic partnership law, and religious freedom, and voters have filed a sufficient referendum petition on this bill. This bill would allow same-sex couples to marry, preserve domestic partnerships only for seniors, and preserve the right of clergy or religious organizations to refuse to perform, recognize, or accommodate any marriage ceremony. And we are going to start with Representative Lias for your opening statement. And you are on the pro side of this issue. Representative Lias, please give us your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks to the Chamber and to the other organizations that helped organize this debate. As you can tell just from the last hour, we've got a lot of important issues to decide as voters this year, and I think it's great we have an opportunity to hear both sides of the debate. It's also good to be here at home. I'm proud to represent Edmonds in the state legislature, and I'm proud to be born and raised in Snohomish County, so it's great to be here in our community talking about an issue that's so important to all of us. How did we get here? Chris read the ballot statement, and the ballot statement tells us that the legislature, together with the governor, passed the law this last session extending marriage to all Washingtonians. And the supporters, the opponents of that collected signatures and have now forced a public vote on this question. So I think as all of us sit down with our ballots to make this decision as to whether we're going to allow loving, committed gay and lesbian couples to get married, I think we should think about what marriage means to us. In my family, I think of my parents who've been married for over 30 years. And I like to tell people that the love and commitment my parents demonstrated was like a Sherman tank for our family parked in the front yard. We knew that we were going to be okay because our parents loved us and they were going to do everything they could to make sure we were safe and that we grew up in a great place. And that is what gay and lesbian couples want to provide to their children. And that is what gay and lesbian couples have provided without the ability to make that commitment in front of their family and friends, without the protections of the law. This is the most important decision that a couple will make: who to settle down with and who to marry and who to make that lifelong commitment with. And this law allows those couples to make the same declaration in front of their family and friends that so many other people in our society have already. It extends the rights and opportunities of marriage. It extends the opportunity to start a family and provide that safe place to kids, to all of our families across the state. And for that reason, I'm asking you to approve Referendum 74 this fall.
Thank you. And also joining us this evening, Mr. Chip White. Mr. White is Communications Director for Preserve Marriage Washington. Welcome, Mr. White. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm glad to be able to participate in this forum, and I'm glad that you all turned out to listen to the speakers on both sides of these important issues. Referendum 74 is very important. Preserve Marriage Washington recognizes this importance in the fact that Preserve Marriage Washington is a grassroots, statewide coalition of individuals and community groups who have joined together to support the traditional definition of marriage. The definition of marriage as the union of one man and one woman, the way that marriage has been recognized by societies around the world for thousands of years. There are 3 key points that I would like to communicate this evening. The first point is A. Already, same-sex domestic partners in Washington have all of the exact same legal rights and benefits as married couples in Washington state. Referendum 74, if it's approved, will grant no new rights or benefits to same-sex couples. The second point is B. It's better for kids to have both a mom and a dad. Children learn something from their male parent, and they learn something from their female parent. And there is no way that a man can be a mom, just like there's no way that a woman can be a dad. It's important for kids to have both a mother and a father. And the third point is C, consequences. There are going to be serious negative consequences to all of society if marriage is redefined. Some believe somehow that even if marriage is redefined, that traditional marriage would coexist alongside this new definition of marriage. That's not true. When marriage is redefined, it's redefined for everybody. I would urge the audience to vote to reject Referendum 74.
Thank you, Mr. White. Representative Leas, do you have a rebuttal to Mr. White's opening statement?
Absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that we can have a civil debate about an issue that's so important. The reality is the legislature did try the path of domestic partnerships to provide some of the rights and benefits that are granted to married couples. And what we've found over the last several years is that while those protections are important for gay and lesbian couples, they are inadequate. They aren't the same as providing the gay and lesbian couples access to marriage. In reality, when you call something different, people start to treat it differently, and then it becomes a different institution. The other thing is domestic partnerships are confusing, and when a partner is admitted to the hospital or there's life-threatening decisions that have to be made, confusion is not something something you want to introduce into that situation. Having to carry your domestic partnership card around with you to prove that you have a relationship with someone. I know my parents, I don't think they could even find their marriage license after 30 years, let alone carry it around with them. So I think it is important to ask ourselves a question. If we're going to provide the same rights and opportunities, the same benefits to gay and lesbian couples, why not just call it the same thing and let them have access to marriage just like everyone else?
Thank you. Mr. White, you have a rebuttal.
Yes, I have a rebuttal to Representative Leah's opening statement.
You have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Representative Leah said that the politicians in Olympia extended marriage to all Washingtonians. Well, that's not true. There are reasons why marriage is extended, and there's reasons why marriage is not extended. A marriage was not extended to minors. We draw a limit at people's age. Marriage was not extended to people who are closely related by blood. We draw a limit there. Marriage was not extended to folks who are already married to somebody else. We draw a limit there, even if they're deeply in love with another person. So it's just not true to say that marriage was extended to all Washingtonians. And it's important for us to stick with the traditional definition of marriage that has worked in all times and all places, and that's one man and one woman.
Thank you. Representative Leas, I have a question for you. I do not see any mention in the Senate bill regarding a public official having the right to refuse to marry same-sex partners. Do they have this right to refuse based on their religious beliefs?
Yes, we included in the law in a couple of places a specific clarification that no religious person, no one that officiates in wedding ceremonies would be required to officiate. And no church would be required to open their church for a wedding. And essentially that is in keeping with the First Amendment to our federal Constitution, which says all of us have the right to freely practice our religion. I think it's important to clarify and remind people, though, that this isn't an issue that falls along religious lines. There's a huge coalition of religious and faith leaders from all over the state, every corner of Washington, that's standing up in favor of marriage equality, because I think pastors and people of faith recognize that when you join a loving, committed couple together in marriage, it provides a safe place to raise kids. It provides that lifelong commitment to one another. And in all of our faith traditions, love and commitment and taking care of one another is what's most important. So we wanted to preserve the rights of our religious organizations, but also recognize that many people of faith embrace marriage equality and want this for their friends and neighbors.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for Mr. White, which is along those lines that you've just mentioned, Representative Leas. It's argued, Mr. White, that we should not change Christian tradition. Marriage is a union between one man and one woman, yet churches and even denominations are accepting same-sex couples and same-sex pastors in their churches as committed married couples. How do you respond to this?
God is the author of marriage, and virtually every nation, every society since the dawn of time has recognized marriage as the union of one man and one woman. But Representative Leas got something right. This is not a sectarian issue. This is not a denominational issue. There are folks from all different religious traditions and folks with no particular religious background who believe in preserving the definition of marriage as one man and one woman because they recognize that that's what's best for society. They recognize that marriage is more than just the desires of the two people in the relationship. Marriage is about what's best for society as a whole, including children. And kids do best when they're reared by a married mother and father.
Okay, thank you. Representative Leas, in 1998, the legislature did pass the Defense of Marriage Act, which provided that marriage is a civil contract between a man and a woman, explicitly stating that marriage between persons other than a male and a female is prohibited. What has changed since then?
You know, I think as Washingtonians, we've had a conversation with one another about what's the best way to protect our families, what's the best way to allow people in our state to thrive and to make that commitment to one another. In 2009, the people of Washington approved Referendum 71, granting domestic partnership rights to gay and lesbian couples. And we've seen that there was no harm from that decision. We've seen states like New York pass full marriage equality for gay and lesbian couples, and we've seen no harm from that decision. And I think Americans, people across the state of Washington, are beginning to realize that marriage is about that lifelong commitment, that it's the most important decision that any of us will ever make is who we choose to settle down with and form a life together with. And there's no reason why we shouldn't allow our loving and committed gay and lesbian neighbors to make that same decision. There's no harm from that decision. And for the children involved, having the safety and security of a loving couple, loving parents, is what's most important in their lives. And this provides that opportunity to all of our families across the state.
Thank you. Mr. White, follow-up question. Some opponents of this referendum argue that this issue is the same as the civil rights issues back in the 60s, that same-sex couples are being discriminated against. How do you respond to this analogy?
This is absolutely not the same as the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Washington state law already provides same-sex couples all of the exact same legal rights and benefits, privileges, and responsibilities as married couples have in Washington state, and as Representative Leas has acknowledged. There is no right that same-sex couples would gain if Referendum 74 were approved. Representative Leas referred to hospital visitation. Same-sex couples already have all of the exact same hospital visitation rights, all of the exact same medical decision-making rights, all of the exact same burial decision-making rights as married people in Washington state. Washingtonians are very progressive when it comes to rights for gays and lesbians, and that's why they passed Referendum 71, which was called the Everything But Marriage Act, and it really did grant everything but marriage.
Thank you. We now are at the point where you will give your closing statement. You have 1 minute each to make a closing statement. We'll start with Representative Leas, please.
Thank you, and thanks again for the opportunity to talk about this issue. I hope this fall, as you cast your ballot, you'll join the thousands of people across the state, small business owners, religious leaders, and faith leaders from across the state, in granting our gay and lesbian couples the same opportunity to start a family, to show that lifelong commitment, to stand in front of their community, in front of the people they love, and make that solemn declaration with one another. Over the last couple years, we've tried domestic partnerships, and as I shared earlier in the debate, we found that it's confusing and that when moments matter, whether you have a card in your wallet or not shouldn't matter. And calling someone your spouse is a universally recognized term. One of my colleagues, a Republican from Walla Walla who ended up supporting marriage equality, commented that domestic partnerships sound like a Molly Maids franchise. And I think it is a recognition that all of our families deserve the same protections, whether they're gay or lesbian or whether they're straight, and that this law before us for our approval will make sure that all of our families across the state are treated the same and have the same opportunities to be successful and thrive together.
Thank you. Mr. White, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
What is at stake with Referendum 74? Well, it's not that any new rights or privileges would be granted to same-sex couples. If there's a problem with confusion in hospitals, that is an educational issue that needs to be addressed with the hospitals. But you know what? I haven't heard of any hospitals being sued. I haven't heard of any hospitals being taken to court for failure to comply with Referendum 71, which is the Everything But Marriage Act, which Washingtonians approved 3 years ago. So what is at stake is the definition of marriage. Marriage between a man and a woman. It's what's best for society. It's what's best for kids to be reared by a married mom and dad. And it's what's best for small businesses. So that if you're a wedding photographer or a wedding cake baker, you don't get sued for refusing to provide those services to a same-sex couple because of your deeply held personal beliefs. Consequences are going to be serious. It's not like New York suffered no consequences. New York has seen plenty of consequences that are serious and negative. I'd urge a reject vote on 74.
Thank you. Let's give a hand to both of the speakers there today. And let's give a hand to all the speakers this evening. I thought they did a very good job. Thank you very much.